He should have been the best player in the world, but he went from bags of potential to bagging prison time.
Mandado de prisão contra o Robinho agora à noite.
This is the story of the tragic end of Robinho, and I've got to start this one from where it all began. Robinho was born in the city of Sao Paulo, Brazil in 1984, and like most kids his age, it was to a poor family. His dad worked as a security guard at the time, and his mum was a house cleaner, just doing what they could so the family could get by. The truth is, Robinho was born on the wrong side of the city. The gang life was high, and people were doing all sorts of illegal stuff. But early on, Robinho chose different, and rather than join the kids his age he saw commit crimes every day, he chose to play football as a way to escape. Back then, it wasn't easy, because Robinho was also trying to help his family put food on the table, and as a result, he also helped with work at the parking lot, helping people park cars in exchange for change to feed home. When he first started, Robinho had dreams of becoming a futsal player. I mean, it was the only realistic thing he could hope for. His parents didn't have enough money to buy him proper boots, and all the time he played the game, it was with his feet. Still, Robinho became dedicated to the sport, and as the months passed, his futsal abilities kept improving, until one day a couple of scouts came along to watch him play, and when they did for the first time, they were amazed at what they'd just seen. For his age, Robinho was one of the best players on the team, and they figured he'd be a perfect addition to the squad. But first, he had to pass the ultimate test of meeting the Great One in person. The scouts were from Santos, arguably the biggest club in Brazil. See, guys, part of the reason Santos was that huge was because the country's greatest player, Pelé, spent most of his career there. After retiring, Pelé worked on the background for the team, helping the coaching staff pick the players he thought would go on to form the next generation of talent in the team. And once he saw Robinho on trial, Pelé couldn't believe his eyes. It was like watching a younger version of himself in action. Straight away, Robinho passed the Pelé test, and at 12 was signed to the Santos Academy. For Pelé though, getting Robinho to shine on the big stage was going to require extra work. The club actually wanted him to play for the futsal team, but Pelé had seen enough to believe this kid would one day become the best in the world. So he specifically made sure Robinho was removed from the futsal team and made it to train with the first team. And it couldn't have come at a better time too, because his big break was just around the corner. Santos was in trouble. Behind the scenes, stuff was going on that affected the players on the pitch. Bad leadership from the guys up, a lack of proper financing and structure, which led to star players not getting their wages paid on time. And in the end, most of the key players that led the first team decided to leave, meaning the club was in trouble. The situation was so bad that even after these dudes left, they couldn't afford to sign any quality replacement for them. And as a result, they turned to guys like Robinho and other academy talent, like Diego, to carry the team. Now, getting the academy players on board was one thing, but getting a coach to agree to a failing project like this was going to be an even bigger challenge. No one wanted to coach Santos because they knew the club was bound to experience the hard times a few games in. In the end though, former Brazilian national team coach Emerson Leão accepted the job, and once his appointment was confirmed, Project Rebuild Santos was underway, and Robinho was about to become the star man. Not exactly at the beginning though, because early on Robinho failed to live up to the hype. He only scored one goal for Santos in his first 14 games, and at the time supporters were calling for other academy talents to be given a chance in the team, because no one believed Robinho would be able to pull it off on the big stage with the way he was playing. On his part, Robinho heard all the criticism, and rather than let it get to him, he doubled down on working hard, and pretty soon the results started paying off. 6 goals in his next 11 games, and suddenly the fans had faith in him again. Robinho had started coming up clutch too. His goals had helped the team qualify for the final stages of the Brazilian Championship, and he bagged big. He scored in the quarterfinals against Sao Paulo, the city he grew up in, and in the semis he scored against Grêmio as well, to book the team a place in the final. Robinho had grown up dreaming of days like this, days where he'd lead his team to a trophy charge, and now he hadn't even turned 20 yet, and he was living his dream. Coming into the second leg of the final against Corinthians, Santos got a penalty, and as Robinho stepped up to take it, he knew the deal. All he had to do was score, and Santos would be crowned champions. Still, the expectation was a lot. He had fans watching, and even Pelé, who trusted him in his early years, praying in the stands this one went in. But you see, Robinho Robinho had been preparing for moments like this his whole life, and once he had the ball on the spot, boom. The kick was enough to make Santos champions of Brazil, and it was official. The way the Santos fans lifted Robinho like that, he was all set to become the next Pele. The next season wasn't quite as historic as the first for Robinho. Santos finished second in the league and lost to Boca Juniors in the Copa Libertadores. But Robinho still balled out, his form was improving all through, and what started as a tricky winger with goals and tricks had now become one of the most promising young talents on the continent. And in 2004, he even went on an incredible run of 11 goals in 10 games, and with 7 matches left to play, had Sao Paulo level on points with the Corinthians in the race to win the league. Anyone watching at this point would have easily pointed out that at this point, if Santos were going to go all the way, they'd need their star man Robinho, and in turn he was delivering in the title run-in. But just when it seemed like life was perfect for Robinho and he was finally achieving his dreams, the one incident happened that almost ruined his career. Growing up, all Robinho had ever known was family, especially the sacrifice his mum and dad had put in for him, and that's why now he was becoming famous, he always made sure they got to enjoy the benefits that came with it too. But one evening while they were having a family dinner, something tragic happened. A couple of armed men broke in, and after taking away the valuables they could find, still weren't satisfied. So they grabbed a big duffel bag and right in front of Robinho's eyes, stuffed his mum in it, put her in the trunk and went away. Robinho was devastated. At that point, his love for the game took a back seat. All he cared about was getting his mum alive and safe away from the kidnappers. And the club knew this too, so they gave Robinho time off for over 6 weeks, so he could focus on getting his mum safe. In the end, Robinho eventually paid the kidnappers $80,000 they demanded from his mum, and once he confirmed with the same eyes he saw her get kidnapped that she was alive and well, it was time to get back out on the pitch again. And Robinho had some unfinished business to settle, helping Santos win the league. It came down to the final day. Santos had to beat Vasco da Gama, and the best part is their destiny was in their own hands. If they won, they'd be champions, nothing else. Add this to the fact that they also wanted to do it for Robinho and his mum now he was back, and the team knew they couldn't choke on this one, and they didn't, securing the win to make sure they were champions and sealed the title. The individual awards started flowing for Robinho. Shortly after, he was awarded as the league's best player and the best in the country, and now he had some of the biggest clubs from around the continent trying to sign him. All over Europe, clubs had started taking note of the next Pele, and it seemed like Robinho was destined to make the move and switch on to the next phase of his career. But the guys at Santos didn't see it like that. They still felt like Robinho had a couple more years to give the club and win more trophies, and the amount being offered by these clubs interested in him was too cheap for a player who could one day win the Ballon d'Or. As a result, Robinho had to spend one more season, and he started great at it too. 13 goals in 12 matches, and his early form was enough to get him into the first competition with the national team, the 2005 Copa America, and Robinho linked up with ballers like Luis Adriano, even assisting him in the final to help Brazil win 3-0 against Argentina and secure the title. Now, the owners of Santos knew there was no denying it. Robinho was definitely ready for European football. Plus, in their minds, the right offer had come for him from the perfect club too, because for $24 million, Robinho was going to join the biggest club in European football, Real Madrid. Robinho's move to Real Madrid was more than just a transfer. It was going to signal the start of a new era. Ever since Florentino Perez took over as president of Real Madrid in 1998, he'd made it his mission to turn Madrid into the center attraction by signing the biggest names in the world. By the time Robinho arrived, he met a Real Madrid team with players like Ronaldo Nazario, Robert Carlos, David Beckham and Zinedine Zidane, the OGs from the Galactico era. The problem though was that as the years went by, these superstar players were past their peak and started declining, and that's why signing a player like Robinho was so important, because Perez wanted to start a 2.0 of the Galacticos again, and they even believed so much in Robinho that they gave him the number 10 jersey at the club. However, Robinho's first season in Madrid was nothing to write home about. He struggled to find his form. It's almost as if he'd realized that the difference in quality between both leagues was tough. It was like Santos, where he knew if he went on a bad run, he'd still be on the team. Here, he had players way better than him, and was at risk of getting dropped if he didn't give 100% or more. Robinho's first season in Madrid didn't quite go as planned. The club finished with 0 trophies, and Robinho's only personal highlight was getting liked by the senior players in the locker room. They all took to him, wanted him to succeed, and even liked him so much that they let him in on their big secret, showing him how to subscribe to Mr. Football's content on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button down below. Robinho still managed to make the Brazilian Brazil team to the 2006 World Cup, but his game time was very limited, and it's easy to understand why. I mean that the Brazil team for this one was stacked to the core. They got knocked out of the quarterfinals thanks to one of Robinho's teammates, Zinedine Zidane, who was playing in his last tournament as a pro. And once the club football resumed again, Robinho was back to action at Madrid, only this time it was with increased pressure. Now the difference between this new season and the previous one was that back then, the Madrid team had star players in abundance, so Robinho had the pressure taken off him a bit. But coming into the 2006-07 season, David Beckham left, Zidane had retired, and even Ronaldo Nazario had left, meaning Robinho had to step up because the spotlight was on him. Madrid won La Liga that season, and Robinho had a decent little spell of 5 goals in 8 matches. But in truth, he was once again largely disappointing, with very few positives about his game. Robinho couldn't string up a series of good performances, apart from a man of the match performance in El Clasico against Barca that season. For large parts, he looked lost, and was once again on the edge with Real Madrid fans. Still, Robinho finished the season as a champion and made Brazil's squad to the Copa America, and it was here he had his name up in the lights again. It didn't start great though, because looking at the team list, Brazil dropped for this one. Most people felt they were going with their B team, and in turn didn't expect them to go far. The competition began with an opening day 2-0 defeat to Mexico, and at that point Robinho had taken enough. He was tired of people talking trash about him and his game, tired of people saying he was a fake, who'd never live up to the Pele hype from years back. And rather than respond to them, Robinho decided to let his feet do the talking, and carried his team all the way. A hat-trick in the next game against Chile, the game-winning goal against Ecuador, add that to 2 more goals in the competition, and Brazil did it. They won the Copa America. Robinho emerged as the best player of the tournament, and this was enough to buy him a little more time with the Madrid fans, because after seeing the stuff he'd done for his national team in this tournament, they knew if they could get the best out of him, he'd be able to repeat this on the international scene. But Robinho came back and was once again dividing opinion. In his first 9 matches, he had 0 goals, and just when it looked like he was going to get cut out of the team, he responded with 12 goal contributions in his next 11. In the end though, his time at Madrid was on a thin line. After seeing him playing inconsistently for 2 years, the club knew they couldn't rely on him week in, week out. And so they went into the market and made sure they strengthened the areas in attack. They got in players like Wesley Sneijder, Arjen Robben, Ruud van Nistelrooy, and before he knew it, once his poor form began again, Robinho was dropped completely. The relationship between Robinho and Real Madrid had now reached breaking point, and where it truly ended was when Robinho realized Madrid was trying to use him as a bargain option. The club wanted to sign Cristiano Ronaldo from Manchester United, and to sweeten the deal, threw in Robinho into the mix. Robinho was furious when he got to know and wanted out. The new problem now was there were only a few days left to the end of the transfer window for that year, and Robinho knew that. So on deadline day proper, he called up his agents to fix a deal. And lucky for him, one club came around with a win-win solution for everyone. Manchester City had just gotten new owners, and as part of the promises to take the team from struggling mid-table to competing with the big boys, they agreed a deal to sign Robinho from Real Madrid for $42 million. Robinho said yes, and the deal was done, but the rumors surrounding this one had only just started. Some even accused Robinho of signing for the wrong club, saying he wanted to sign for Manchester United instead. In everything though, Robinho did look happy to be at City. Heck, he even curled one in top bins on his debut. He scored a hat-trick a few weeks later, but in truth, that was as good as it got. 12 goals before the new year, the following 17 games, 0 goals. He was about to repeat his cycle again. His next season at City was even worse. This time his injury problems became more, having to miss out for 3 months, and by the time he got back, well, City had moved on. In the beginning, Robinho was the club's biggest star, but in that summer window, they'd signed players like Emmanuel Adebayor and Carlos Tevez, meaning if Robinho didn't improve and keep his performances up, he'd sit on the bench. City had also switched coaches too. Roberto Mancini was in, and he made it clear from the start that he only wanted players who were willing to work for the team, and all of that just signaled the end for Robinho. And by January 2010, with the World Cup around the corner, Robinho knew knew that if he wanted to make the team, he needed more game time, and that's when he decided to go home. A lone move back to Santos. It did the trick too because Robinho got his form back. In 23 matches back home for Santos, he hit 12 goals, even won the Brazilian Cup with Santos, and made the World Cup team. In South Africa, Robinho once again showed glimpses of just how good he could be. He scored twice in the competition, but unfortunately they couldn't make it past the round of 16 stage, and on his return he was packing his bags to a different location. City's coach Mancini didn't believe Robinho had the energy and drive he wanted on his new team, but Robinho's World Cup form had convinced one man that Robinho was the player he needed to make his team great again. Over to AC Milan, it was about keeping the power in check. Zlatan Ibrahimovic had been following Robinho for months, and after seeing the guy play, he figured Robinho would be a great asset to a Milan team that already had players like Thiago Silva, Clarence Seedorf, Ronaldinho, and other star names. In the end, Robinho came, and his first season proved Zlatan right. 20 goals in 38 matches. Robinho was back. His second season in Italy didn't go so well though. The injury problems came back, forcing him to miss a large part of the season, and by his third season in Milan, everything had changed. All the star names were gone, including Zlatan, the guy who wanted him to come. Now the squad was much younger, and they looked up to experienced players like Robinho to lead the team. But the pressure was too much on Robinho because in the end he wanted out. His last season in Milan went wrong. Only managed 2 goals the entire season, and at this point, now being over 30, Robinho figured there was no point trying to sign for a top club in Europe anymore. Either that or he was really in love with the football back home because, yeah, he signed for Santos again. This time though, the magic wasn't there. The young players he came to meet earlier, well, they were no longer young and were simply doing better than him. Robinho's stint at Santos didn't last long, and pretty soon he received a proposal from one of his former coaches to try out a new league, and he was off to China. He signed for Guangzhou Evergrande in a league trying to rebuild itself and attract top talent. But just like his career, the move lasted only 6 months, and after that he went on tour. Came back to Brazil to play for Atletico Mineiro, and went to Turkey and had spells at Sivasspor, then Istanbul Başakşehir. And once he was done, he came back to Santos for what should have been his 4th spell, but this time the club said no. And it wasn't just because he was at the end of his career, but also because he'd messed up with his life and was about to pay for it. In 2013, while he was still in Milan, Robinho and his friends had gone on a night out in a club when they hooked up with a woman and did illegal stuff to her. When the evidence came out, it showed that Robinho had even mocked her for coming out with the truth and simply didn't care much. 4 years later, in 2017, he was given a prison sentence of 9 years. And the only reason he isn't serving it now is because of extradition laws in Brazil. A shame, man, what could have been? He went from being the next Pele to a mini version of Ronaldinho's end story. That's right, just like Robinho, Ronaldinho had a promising start and should have been the best player of his generation. But while he was putting smiles on faces every week, deep down he was fighting with something that kept destroying him from the inside. You can find out what that thing was by hitting the next video to check out how Ronaldinho ruined his career from being the greatest in the world to a prison inmate.